Well, we're discussing the road to GST, which is looking uncertain, and we're also discussing the implications of both the GST rollout and demonetization on the upcoming budget. Sachin, Menon, let me come to you now and ask you of what you think and expect as far as a possible hike in the service tax rate is concerned. Do you believe that that is likely on the anvil? And how do you see the finance minister juggling this business of trying to spur growth and at the same time keep in mind the eventual GST rollout and balance his books?
Well, I think this is a difficult task. One thing which is easy for the finance minister is to increase the service tax rate. Because last year also we expected that the rate will go up considerably, but it didn't go to the extent what we expected. So this year maybe to begin with, it is more or less certain that services will attract 18% GST under the GST scenario and GST proposed GST law. So it makes sense for the finance minister to increase the rate to 16 or 18% in this coming budget. And if at all the GST, there is an agreement to tax it lower, then people will be more happy. So there is nothing to lose. So from that perspective, it is logical that service tax rate could go up in this budget. As regards the goods are concerned, perhaps the rates are already on the peak. And I don't think that there is much room for any maneuver in terms of increase in the rate rather than reduction in the rate. So therefore, there has to be a balancing act from the government side, and also it is difficult for, as I told you earlier, difficult to estimate what is the impact of demonetization. And as far as demonetization is concerned, in my view, it is exaggerated to a great extent because the impact of demonetization will not be felt in the core sectors, cement, steel, etc. Or those which is used or those used by the B2B scenarios where the transaction happened through proper banking channels. It would hit below the belt the FMCG sector where huge cash transaction happened with, for example, household equipments or air conditioners, cars, fridges, or even consumer goods like maybe these are the areas where the demonetization impact will be felt. And as far as I see going by the queue what you are seeing in the banks, etc., it is slowly and steadily getting streamlined. And I don't think that impact will remain forever. It could be maybe first 2 or 3 months, first quarter, and by the time it should come to normal. So therefore, even though there could be a contraction of demand in the first quarter, it will pick up in the second quarter. And I think things will be back to normal as far as the industry is concerned.
Gentlemen, you believe that things will be back to normal in about a quarter or a quarter and a half. But gentlemen, let me ask each one of you, what you expect in terms of the possibility of a radical reduction, at least in the corporate tax rate. Remember, the finance minister had articulated a roadmap to 25%. We haven't really moved the needle much, and 25% means also giving up a lot of the exemptions. So, Mani, let me start by asking you, the clamor now seems to be that look what's happening in America. We've just heard the news of Ford actually scrapping its Mexico plant and investing more in Michigan because of the threat of taxes as well as the possibility of lower corporate taxes in the US. So given all of that, what can we truly expect now as far as corporate taxes are concerned? Money.
Okay, as far as corporate taxes are concerned, I think the finance minister has already announced a roadmap where progressively it will be reduced to 25%. Last year we didn't make much headway, and this year possibly some headway is expected. But more
Mani,
important...
I'll request you to just hold on, Mani. We've got the Finance Minister of Jammu and Kashmir, Mr. Hasib Drabu, with us. Mr. Drabu, appreciate you joining us. It seems like it's been a bit of an anti-climax. Day 2 of the GST Council meeting, we were told yesterday by all state finance ministers the issue of dual control would be taken up. I believe that wasn't even addressed even in today's meeting. So where are we headed then?
Well, I think it's been pending for a long while. It's being parked, and that's probably the last thing that will be dealt with. But we still made some headway. The compensation law is finally kind of with the revised wording, legal language and all that is kind of been done. So I think what remains really now, which has been a stumbling block for quite some time, is the cross-empowerment issue. So hopefully 16th meeting, that is the only thing on the agenda now. Because yesterday we did a lot of things on the BFSI sectors of how to deal with issues that had come up in insurance and finance and so on and so forth. I think some thought will have to go into that because there is a genuine concern being expressed by a lot of corporates on how do you handle those transactions where it's not very clear where the things originates and where it is consumed. So I think some time was spent on that, and a large chunk of the IGST, except the empowerment issue, I think 16 sections of the IGST were discussed. A lot of time was spent on this because I think it's also reached a very important phase because I don't tend to see it negatively. This is India's first federal institution, and some of very critical issues which have a bearing on the long-term shape of federalism in India did come up for discussion, like this whole issue of territorial waters. Now, 12 nautical miles, is it within the state or not within the state? Is it interstate or not interstate? Who has the administrative powers and all that? And associated with that, the SEZ. A lot of discussion took place. I think very enlightened discussions took place, and it will need some thinking before we kind of try and figure out how to handle these critical issues, because these are constitutional matters and will have a long-term impact on how things pan out. So it's not as if it was a deadlock, and genuinely a lot of debate took place on definition of state and so on and so forth. And in that, I think very little time was left for the cross-empowerment issue. I think it started only at about 1:15, 1:20, and just nearing lunch. And then the 3 o'clock meeting was on the union budget. So didn't get much time to rack our brains on the empowerment thing.
So, Mr. Dhruva, now also the complexity of the issue is understood, but now it seems that politics is also driving the negotiations. I mean, we hear from the Haryana finance minister and we get one picture. You hear from the West Bengal or the Kerala finance minister, you hear a different picture. You hear from the Tamil Nadu representative, you get a third picture. So, I think politics has also now injected itself into the GST negotiations. So what should we make realistically of the rollout timeline? We've heard April is not possible at all, perhaps July 1, and now some saying September.
Well, there is, of course, politics now, which has, for the first time in the last 3-4 meetings, has gotten led by West Bengal and so on and so forth. But really, so far it had not been. But yes, I mean, I would go along with you and say that post-demonetization, I think that critically affected GST, the way it was conducted. It's not so much about position, it's the way the dialogue happens. And I think that was done in a certain manner. But I re-emphasize the point that it is a federal institution, and easy way outs, if we do right now, voting and all, would set a bad precedent, and as much was said by the finance minister. So he would still like to build consensus. I now am saying your guess is as good as mine as to when it will roll out. But I would probably look at a July thing more than April and less than September. So I think July is when you would start looking at it. I think the announcement of elections for UP today also did dampen the whole thing of trying to finish it off. So, so I think we are looking more at a July rollout than April rollout.
Okay, so you're going with July. Let me end then by asking you, sir, on this vexed issue of dual control. Again, and if you listen to what the finance ministers of West Bengal, Kerala, etc. say, then there seems to have been absolutely no convergence in the last several meetings on the issue of dual control, with both the centre as well as the state sticking to their positions. So what should we then realistically expect on the 16th when the council meets again?
We never discussed it beyond, the last 3-4 meetings. We've always kind of parked and said that let's finish off whatever was, what our issues are, the less contentious issues, and we resolve those. I don't honestly think that from a GST architectural point of view or from an administrative point of view, this is a critical issue. Where it becomes a critical issue is really a battle of two bureaucracies, the central bureaucracy and the state bureaucracy. I think some way we have to converge in terms of what is the most efficient way of doing it. Perhaps this whole thing of telecom, insurance, and others, because they did come out and speak openly about how they would not want multiple controls. You would probably tend to see that within the 1.5 crore turnover, below that, states have the full role. Above that, dual control. But dual control in the sense of 75-25 is what my bet would be. 25% for the centre and 75% for the states, or thereabouts, is where it would eventually land up. So I don't see it in terms of a critical, vexed issue. It's purely both bureaucracies trying to figure out who has more control and where do the Diwali gifts go. So that's how.
Well, that complication hopefully will get addressed on the 16th of January. Mr. Dravu, thanks very much for joining us. That's the Finance Minister of J&K, and as that's my hunch as well, that for the first time we've actually seen politics now being injected into the negotiations over the GST. But let's also listen in to Captain Abhimanyu, the Finance Minister of Haryana, speaking to us on what transpired today and what we should now expect on 16th.
As far as GST is concerned, we have concluded most of the issues related to the draft CGST, SGST and IGST. And as far as cross empowerment is concerned, we have decided that we'll be sitting again on 16th of January. But broadly, we have discussed various options as they've already been discussed earlier. And I am sure that the consensus will emerge on this very soon.
So what took so long today in the morning, which was scheduled for the GST, when cross empowerment didn't come at all?
There were certain pending issues of the previous discussions. For example, the issue of definition of state as far as territorial waters of the coastal areas are concerned. So it took a lot of time. Besides that, there were certain other issues which are yet to be clarified in the previous discussion. So all those issues now.
So now on the
stand
timeline,
thrashed out.
when it comes to the timeline, the rollout of GST, 1st April 2017 seems to be impossible, because now you have to first do a concurrence on the pending issues, and then only you can table the subsequent legislations in the parliament, further a nod by the states as well, and then the rollout.
See, most of the things which are left now are procedural formalities, and the basic issues are more or less thrashed out. And I still don't see it to be an impossibility. We will try to achieve it as soon as possible, and it is in the interest of the states that GST comes into effect as soon as possible, because we will start getting compensation also in case of any reduction in our growth rate.